So this is how I do weekly water changes. Now, when I first started getting into fish keeping, I had so many questions like, how do you do the water change? Do you use a siphon and then just take buckets out and then pour buckets back in? I mean, that is one method. It's a very slow method. And then I quickly found out that you can use a snake or a siphon tube that you connect to your sink, and then you can just turn on your water on the sink, and it pull that pressure of turning the water on. You put one end in your tank and then you hook it up to your sink. When you turn the water on, it pulls water from your tank and into the sink. Now that is also a much quicker option, but what I've found over time, the quickest option is buying a water pump, putting that water pump in my tank, and then pumping out my water to a window, or not to a window, actually through the window and outside. That's the quickest way. Now, especially for these larger tanks, like once you start getting into like a 50 gallon, a 75 gallon, or even larger, you're gonna wanna pump just because it takes so long. You're gonna be spending hours and hours doing water changes if you don't have a pump. Now, you can do the siphon into a bucket if you have a smaller tank, because those are pretty easy to refill, or if you want to clean your gravel for whatever reason. I set up my tank so I don't really have to clean gravel. I have pretty strong filtration in all of my tanks. Even like a heavier planted tank, I still have filtration in it because I don't want anything sitting on the substrate. So I like having some water movement in there. I'll use a Wavemaker and blow some water around in order to get that to go into the filters. I think it makes for just like a much cleaner tank. That's just what I prefer. Maybe you prefer something different. Some people prefer like a real low tech setup. That's what I prefer. And that's what's great about the hobby is you can do whatever you want, really. And so this is my process for changing water. It takes me about an hour to do it for 4 tanks. And I have a 75 gallon, a 48 gallon, a 20 gallon, and a 29 gallon. Now on this bigger tank behind me, the 75 gallon, I mean, it could be a small tank for some, but 75 is big for me at this point. I use a water pump, like I said, and I pump it outside. I do have the siphon tube that goes from my faucet in my bathroom right outside my office here, and then I just fill it up. I try to get the water temperature to be the exact same. And another thing that I don't know if I struggle with it, but I just had questions about it, is when do you put in the C-Chem Prime? Do you put it before you put your water in? Do you put it during? Do you put it after? Because you don't want to stress your fish out. That's just something that, you know, I researched as a beginner. But here's what I do is, when I drain the tank, and before I fill it up, I'll dose half or like 3/4 of the amount for the entire tank. And then I fill it up, and then once I get it to almost full, I put in the remaining. And I actually go a little bit over too. So if, let's just say I need 7 milliliters for a 75 gallon tank, I'll put maybe 5 milliliters in there. And then once I get it complete full, I'll put maybe another 3 or 4. I like kind of like just overdosing a little bit just to make sure that there's no chlorine. You can put up to, I think it's like 2 to maybe even 3 times. I'm not sure. You can check on that. I mean, it's fairly safe. I don't go completely overboard. I just give it a little bit extra just to make sure the fish aren't under any stress. And you can use different products. I just decided on C-Chem Prime. I think I was watching Caveman Aquatics at the time, and I knew that's what he was using. So that's what I decided to use. So this is my process on how I change the water in all my tanks. So before I do a water change, I always want to check my water. And the one thing that you want to do, and I didn't fully realize this until I watched Caveman Aquatics, what you want to do is make sure you pound the nitrate 1 and nitrate 2 solution if you use this API product. Pound it for 30 seconds against your hand. It has to be shaken up so well. And so I do that for 30 seconds, and then I'll shake the container for 1 minute, and then I let it sit for 5 minutes. And it's super important that you follow that exact process, because I've taken 2 water samples, and one, I didn't shake it as much. And then the second one I did, and you get 2 completely different readings. This looks like it's somewhere in between 5 and 10. So it takes me 1 hour to do water changes for 4 tanks, 75, 48, 20, and a 29 gallon. Now for the bigger tanks, the 75 and the 48, what I do have is a pump that I just hook up and port it outside my window there. You can kind of see in the background where there's a little ball valve there. And I just empty all the water that way. So it's so much quicker than using the siphon tube that I have that goes to my sink. Now I do have water softener, so I always make sure that I turn that off. And my water probably comes out of the tap like at a pH of like 8 to 8.1. So it's perfect for keeping African cichlids. And if you see in the video here, you can see the little happy face scrub daddy that I have. I just find that that's useful to clean the inside of the tank, at least the water line, as the week goes by and the water slowly goes down, which it doesn't do as much in the 75 because I have a lid on it that I made out of acrylic. I custom cut it, but you can see those marks. So I just like to get rid of those marks as best as I can. Just makes a tank look a lot cleaner. And then I also have a magic eraser sponge. I've got a bunch of them. I highly recommend buying like a big bag of those. I use those all the time to clean off like the grime on hoses, tubes, filters, really anything. They work wonders if you keep it up and maintain it. Now, if you let it go for a long time, it's a little harder to scrub that kind of stuff off. But I find it super useful. And I like to change my water every single week, whether it needs it or not. Usually my Mbuna need it. These little guys don't really need it. The nitrates don't get that high, but if I'm changing water in one tank, I might as well just change it in all my tanks. And I just think when you keep up with it and you clean it, you just do the little maintenance, it just makes it so much more enjoyable than letting it go for a while. And then you have all this grime, and then it's like a big task. It's like 1 hour out of the week is pretty simple. And I'm trying to get a storage container that will allow me to hold water so I can just fill it up quickly too. It'll probably take me a half hour, which is very small amount of time. I mean, other than that, it's just like daily feeding. It's very, very little maintenance once you have it set up. And then I have a little hornwort tank here that I'll drain and then I'll fill it up. You can see I'm filling it up with tank water from another tank just to give it some nitrate so it grows strong. And then after I'm done doing all these water changes, of course, I always put C-Chem Prime in there because you want to kill all the chlorine and chloramines in your water, or not kill them, but it binds to them. And I don't know exactly how it works, but you always want to dechlorinate your water. And then I always add C-Chem Flourish, which is for plants. It's just minerals and everything, and it keeps the plants just looking so nice. All right, so I pulled up a list of just a bunch of common beginner questions for like water changes, and then I'm just going to answer them of exactly what I do. So, how often should you change your aquarium water? Well, I do once a week. I like clean water, but it really depends on your setup, honestly. You could have a setup where you have a lot of plants, and you might not have to change your water, even every 2 weeks. Maybe it's every 3 weeks. The thing that is most important is you want to make sure that your nitrates don't creep up. You want to make sure that they test low. Once they start getting over like 40 parts per million, that's too much, and you need to bring that down to a more reasonable level, like under 10. So it really just depends. But in good practice, I think you just want to change your water on a regular basis. It doesn't take that long, and when you do it, you can clean other parts of your tank. So your tank just looks better and you enjoy the hobby more. That's one reason why I change water. I don't want to get into the hobby because I never want to do water changes. I want to get into the hobby because I enjoy my fish. I mean they live in this water in this small container. So by not giving them fresh, good water, you know, it's not good to just stay in that same water all of the time without it being replenished. Now, if you have a very heavily planted tank, that can change. You can create your whole, you know, own ecosystem. But by default, I go once a week, and sometimes I'll throw in an extra one midweek, especially if you have fish that produce a lot of waste, like African cichlids or Central or South American cichlids. So how much water should you change each time? Well, again, that also depends. But if you're doing regular water changes, I usually go about 50%. Right around 50%, I feel is pretty good. And again, I test my nitrates. So I make sure that I test my nitrates every single time before I do a water change to see where I'm at. And if I need to do an extra one, then I'll do an extra one. It's not a big deal. And so here's an interesting one. Do I need to remove the fish during a water change? Absolutely not. Leave your fish in there. You don't want to stress them out even more. What's the best way to remove debris from the gravel? Well, I personally like using Wavemakers and Canister Filters. Or hang-on back filter. I'm just a big supporter of filters and almost overfiltrating your water. You kind of want to be careful. You don't want to overfiltrate to the point where your fish are really small and blowing around all over the place. That won't be good. But I like blowing stuff up from the gravel and it gets caught in the filter, and then I change the filter out. However, you can gravel vac. If there's some detritus on your bottom of your tank and you just don't like the way that looks, by all means, gravel vac it. Do I need to use water conditioner every time? Well, you absolutely do. You can't put chlorine and chloramines in your fish tank. What that's going to do is that's going to break your nitrogen cycle. You have good bacteria inside your tank that will convert ammonia to nitrite, and then from nitrite to nitrate. And then by doing a water change, you're removing that nitrate. And you absolutely have to condition your water and remove all those chlorine and chloramine, because that will just kill all the beneficial bacteria that keeps your nitrogen cycle alive. So, and I made this mistake in the past, like before I knew anything about fish keeping. This was many, many, many years ago. Is I would like clean all my filters, clean all the media, and you're basically just getting rid of all the good bacteria. I mean, thankfully, bacteria does grow on every surface. So even your rocks and your gravel, it has some bacteria. So even if you do make a mistake and you over clean, you're probably still going to be okay, because as long as you don't completely clean everything in the tank, or if you don't condition your water at all, that will kill all the bacteria eventually. So should I temperature match the new water exactly? Well, you don't have to be exact, but you should be within a few degrees. If you're doing a 50% water change, and let's say you put your water temperature is normally like 78 degrees, and then you're putting in water temperature that's say 72, well, your heater's probably going to make up for that, and your water temperature is already at a good temp. So adding just a half of your water back in that's just a few, like maybe 5-6 degrees lower, is probably only going to lower your tank maybe like 1 or 2 degrees. But with that being said, try to match it as good as you can. Get a little temperature gauge. They're like $9. I use them all the time. I just make sure that the water I have in is not too hot or too cold. If it is, I adjust it, and then I just check it again. And I usually check it a few times. I like to dial it in within 1 degree. That's just my personal preference. Anything else, I mean, it's going to cause some stress on the fish if it's not exact. I mean, the fish are pretty hardy. They can withstand like a few degrees temperature change, but if you don't have to, why do it? And can I use tap water for water changes? Absolutely. Just make sure you condition it before you change your water, or before you put the new water in. And then what happens if I don't change my tank's water? Well, that your nitrates will build up eventually. I mean, if you have a super heavily planted tank, if you don't change your water, you never add water to it, you're eventually just all your water is gonna evaporate. But assuming you don't change your water and you just add water, that doesn't remove any nitrates from the water. If your bioload, like your fish bioload, is greater than what your plants can handle, your nitrates are going to build up in that tank, and you're eventually going to kill all your fish. So can I do too many water changes? Absolutely. There's no need to over change your water. If your nitrates test in a reasonable level, and let's say you changed your water just a few days ago, there's no reason to change it if your nitrates are still testing low. You just don't need to stress your fish out like that. You don't need to have your tank like ultra clean. You know, you can scrub the algae off or whatever, but you don't need to keep changing the water over and over again. And why does my fish act weird after a water change? That I'm not too sure. Usually it kind of like, I mean, there are some they could be acting more lively, or they could be acting maybe a little stressed out. If you did like a really big water change, maybe it stressed the fish out. Maybe you forgot to add the chlorine and chloramine remover. That could stress them out. It could be a lot of different things. But so those are just like some questions that I came up with that I see that are commonly asked, and I just want to answer them with how I would answer them and what I've done just from experience. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next video.